History remembers gangsters as cold, calculating killers. The truth? They were often paranoid, petty, and profoundly weird. We're about to explore the mob bosses who needed food tasters for their spaghetti, the killers who sued rivals for stealing their extortion methods, and the bizarre reason Al Capone went to war over spoiled milk. These are the 32 absurd habits they never showed in the movies. 1. Some mobsters took the organized part of organized crime a little too seriously, blurring the line between gangster and management guru. One outfit reportedly launched a genuine consulting agency for fellow criminals. Forget shakedowns, they were hosting workshops. Imagine a backroom meeting with a chalkboard diagramming the synergies of loan sharking and illegal gambling. They allegedly handed out business cards identifying themselves as solutions experts or conflict resolution specialists. They charged other crews hefty fees for brilliant advice like, maybe don't park your getaway car in a tow-away zone. It was less a criminal enterprise and more a very violent, poorly lit startup, complete with networking events where the main icebreaker was comparing rap sheets. 2. For guys who built empires on cunning, some gangsters had a bafflingly stupid habit when it came to going incognito. When the heat was on, they wouldn't just disappear. They'd reinvent themselves with the worst fake identities imaginable. We're not talking deep cover stuff. We're talking about a notorious killer named Tony the Butcher Falcone, suddenly insisting his name was Tony the Baker Smith. They'd adopt personas so comically unbelievable, they might as well have worn a sign that said, "Definitely not a fugitive." Picture a 5-foot-tall, notoriously short-tempered enforcer trying to blend in as a gentle birdwatcher. Their overconfidence was their undoing, proving that you can outrun the cops, but you can't outrun your own lack of imagination. 3. In the world of organized crime, prejudice wasn't just morally ugly, it was a terrible business model. Take George "Bugs" Moran, Al Capone's big rival in Chicago. Moran had a crippling, fanatical habit. He absolutely despised Italian gangsters and refused to cooperate with them under any circumstances. While Capone was building a diverse, almost corporate syndicate by working with anyone who could make him money, Moran was stuck in his own echo chamber of hate. This stubborn refusal to form alliances left him isolated and vulnerable. It ultimately led to his crew getting famously annihilated in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. It's a perfect historical lesson. Being a racist is not only a garbage way to live, but it might also get your entire operation wiped out. 4. When mobsters had a disagreement, they didn't just start shooting. That was messy. Instead, they practiced a peculiar ritual called the sit-down. This was basically a corporate meeting, but with a much higher chance of someone ending up in a concrete block. The rules were strict and the etiquette was paramount. You'd gather in the dimly lit backroom of an Italian restaurant, surrounded by plates of pasta, and calmly negotiate turf wars or business disputes. It was a bizarre mix of extreme politeness and unspoken menace. "Donatello, your guys have been operating on my block, and also, this veal is exquisite. My compliments to the chef." After hours of tense discussion, they'd often kiss each other on the cheek and leave, having resolved everything without a single bullet fired. For now. 5. You'd assume a crime boss's biggest weakness would be money, power, or maybe a rival. But for one particular mobster, it was a fried pastry shell filled with sweet cheese. This guy had a bizarre, all-consuming obsession with cannoli. He wouldn't just eat them, he would critique them like a Michelin-starred food critic. He forced his underlings to participate in blind taste tests and would fly into a rage if the ricotta was too grainy or the shell wasn't crispy enough. He'd walk into a bakery, take one bite, and declare, "This is an insult to my heritage." His crew would just nod nervously, knowing a bad cannoli review could be more dangerous than skimming profits. It's a wild thought. A criminal empire potentially crumbling because the boss couldn't find a decent dessert. 6. Gangsters. And the law should be natural enemies, but some mobsters developed a strange hobby, weaponizing the legal system for the most petty reasons imaginable. They didn't just have lawyers to keep them out of jail, they used them to file lawsuits. One notorious figure actually sued a newspaper for defamation because they called him chubby. Not a murderer, not a racketeer, but chubby. And he won the case. Another tried to sue a rival gang for copyright infringement on their specific method of shaking down businesses. Imagine a courtroom where two mob lawyers argue over who has the patent on breaking kneecaps. They'd strut in like offended CEOs, demanding justice for their brand. It was the ultimate power move, using the system you're dedicated to breaking. 7. The most fundamental rule in the Gangster Handbook wasn't about loyalty or silence, it was about interior design, specifically where you sit in a restaurant. This habit was a non-negotiable life-or-death principle. A wise guy never ever sits with his back to the entrance. It was the first thing they looked for. The perfect spot was always in a corner, back against a solid wall, with a panoramic view of every single person who walked in or out. This turned every simple dinner into a strategic military operation. A waiter trying to seat a maidman at a central table was making a potentially fatal career mistake. It was a constant, low-level paranoia that meant you could never truly relax, not even over a nice bowl of spaghetti and meatballs. 8. For a high-level gangster, a car was never just for transportation. It was a personal tank disguised as a luxury sedan. Mobsters had a habit of customizing their vehicles into rolling fortresses. We're not talking about fancy rims, we're talking about quarter-inch thick bulletproof glass, steel plates welded inside the door panels, and secret compartments for stashing weapons. Some cars even featured Bond-like gadgets, such as deployable oil slicks or rear-facing gun ports. Al Capone's iconic Cadillac was not only armored to the teeth but also painted the exact same green as Chicago's police cars, just to create maximum confusion during a chase. It was the ultimate flex, a moving statement that said, "Killing me is going to be a very expensive and difficult project for you." 9. The Thompson submachine gun, or the Tommy gun, wasn't just a piece of hardware for gangsters. It was a status symbol. It was the criminal equivalent of a luxury sports car. Loud, expensive, and ridiculously impractical for daily use. Mobsters flaunted these things not always for their firepower, but for their sheer theatricality. Picture a guy in a pinstripe suit accessorizing with a drum-fed machine gun, some even with custom engravings or gold plating. It was pure intimidation and branding. In reality, the weapon was heavy, wildly inaccurate in untrained hands, and would likely spray bullets into everything except the intended target. But that didn't matter. The deafening roar and the visual statement were the point. It was a declaration that you had enough money and audacity to own the most menacing weapon on the street. 10. In a world filled with violence and betrayal, some of the most feared mob bosses cultivated a habit that was bafflingly gentle. They were deeply passionate pigeon fanciers. Men who wouldn't hesitate to order a hit would spend their afternoons on city rooftops, meticulously caring for their flocks of racing pigeons. Figures like Lucky Luciano were known to be devoted to this hobby, finding a strange sort of peace in the quiet routine of feeding and training their birds. It was a bizarre contrast. The same mind plotting a turf war was also tenderly nurturing a champion racer. This peculiar pastime offered a glimpse into the complex psychology of these men, a quiet escape from the constant paranoia of their lives, proving even hardened killers need a gentle hobby. 11. The art of pettiness was perfected by gangsters, and their weirdest habit was sending extravagant floral arrangements to the funerals of their rivals. Rivals they had likely helped put in the ground. This wasn't a gesture of respect, it was the ultimate power move, a form of high-class trolling. Imagine a grieving family receiving a massive wreath shaped like a horseshoe with a card that reads, "Tough break." One mobster famously sent a floral display that spelled out, "Rest in pieces." It was a cold, calculated message to everyone in attendance. I am untouchable and I'm not even trying to hide it. It turned a solemn occasion into a public display of dominance, all communicated through the language of roses and lilies. 12. The famous Code of Silence, Omerta, was more than a mere rule. It was a deeply ingrained paranoid habit that dictated every aspect of a mobster's life. It wasn't just about not ratting to the police. It meant you couldn't speak about the business to anyone. Not your friends, not your family, not even your own wife in the privacy of your home. This created an atmosphere of constant, suffocating suspicion. Every conversation was a potential minefield. A careless word could be interpreted as a breach of trust, and the punishment for that was notoriously final. This ritualized silence was the bedrock of their world, a daily practice in paranoia, where the most dangerous weapon wasn't a gun, but your own tongue. 13. Mobsters were masters of public relations, and one of their most effective habits was being ridiculously, almost obscenely, generous tippers. Al Capone was legendary for peeling off $100 bills, a small fortune in the 1920s, for minor services from waiters, bellhops, and coat check attendants. This wasn't just a display of ego, though that was certainly part of it. It was a calculated business strategy. This lavish generosity bought silence, loyalty, and an invaluable network of eyes and ears throughout the city. It also built a public image of a benevolent man of the people, making him harder to prosecute. The message was clear: stay on my good side and you'll be rewarded. Get on my bad side and you already know the alternative. 14. A gangster's suit was his armor, both literally and figuratively. They had a habit of employing personal tailors, but these weren't just for making them look sharp. The real job of a mob tailor was to be a weapons concealment expert. They were masters of creating custom-fitted suits with ingeniously hidden pockets and holsters. A jacket had to hang perfectly, showing no bulge from the .38 Special tucked underneath. Trousers were designed with reinforced seams to carry extra weight without sagging. It was the intersection of high fashion and deadly function. The goal was to maintain an impeccable, elegant silhouette while being armed to the teeth, ready for violence at a moment's notice without ever looking uncivilized. 15. While common criminals thrive in the shadows, top-tier gangsters had a habit of living their lives in the brightest possible spotlight. They rejected the low-profile approach entirely. Instead of hiding, they made a point of being seen everywhere. Front row seats at championship fights, the best tables at the city's most exclusive restaurants, and in newspaper photos shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. This wasn't arrogance. It was a strategy. By embedding themselves in high society, they normalized their presence and power. It was a way of laundering their reputation in public, making it harder for law enforcement to paint them as simple thugs when they were dining with judges. They were hiding in plain sight, daring anyone to challenge them. 16. The gangster pinky ring was not just an accessory, it was a billboard for the ego. This wasn't subtle jewelry. It was a loud, flashy declaration of wealth and power, often featuring a diamond large enough to be a navigational hazard. This habit was all about signaling. The ring announced your status in the organization and your success in a world where cash was king. Some were so gaudy, they were practically weapons themselves. Beyond the bling, it was a tool. A soft tap on a glass could command a room's attention, while a more forceful tap on someone's jaw could deliver a very different message. It was a perfect symbol of the mobster ethos, a blend of extravagant taste, unspoken threat, and a complete lack of subtlety. 17. When your face is the government's favorite dartboard target, you develop some desperate habits. For many high-profile gangsters, this meant attempting a complete physical reinvention, often with gruesome and spectacularly unsuccessful results. The legendary John Dillinger, for instance, didn't just grow a mustache. He paid a shady, unlicensed doctor a small fortune for primitive plastic surgery. He also tried to chemically burn his fingerprints off with acid, an agonizing process that sounds like something out of a horror movie. The result? He was left in constant pain, with a slightly swollen, rearranged face that was still unmistakably his, and scarred fingertips that forensic experts could still easily identify. It was the ultimate act of vanity and desperation, proving that while you might be able to outrun the law, trying to outrun your own face usually just leaves you looking like a botched art project. 18. There's nothing like a hail of bullets to make a man contemplate his eternal destiny. As mob boss Dutch Schultz lay dying in a hospital bed, bleeding out from multiple gunshot wounds, he developed a sudden and intense interest in theology. In his final, delirious hours, he frantically demanded a priest be brought to him for an emergency baptism. This was a man whose life's work consisted of murder, racketeering, and general mayhem. His sudden conversion wasn't so much a heartfelt plea for forgiveness as it was the ultimate spiritual loophole hunt. It was a gangster's final desperate bet, trying to secure some kind of divine fire insurance at the last possible second. You have to wonder what was going through his mind. Was he genuinely repentant, or just trying to pull one last fast one on St. Peter at the pearly gates? 19. The concept of prison as a place of punishment simply did not apply to the gangster elite. For them, a prison sentence was more like a mandatory corporate retreat. They had a deeply ingrained habit of transforming their cells from stark concrete boxes into opulent private lounges. Al Capone's famous cell in Philadelphia wasn't a place of penitence. It was a fully furnished office suite. We're talking plush oriental rugs on the floor, tasteful oil paintings on the walls, a comfortable armchair, and a cabinet radio that likely cost more than the warden's annual salary. He was permitted to run his empire from behind bars, enjoying gourmet meals and fine cigars while lesser inmates ate gruel. It was the ultimate flex, a clear message that the law could cage their body, but their power and lifestyle were completely untouchable. 20. The domestic life of a top-tier mobster was a masterclass in psychological gymnastics. Many of these men, who were professionally monstrous, cultivated a bizarre habit of being intensely strict, almost comically moralistic fathers at home. A guy could spend his afternoon orchestrating a brutal turf war, then come home and deliver a stern lecture to his son about the importance of table manners and telling the truth. Can you imagine the sheer cognitive dissonance required to live that life? Son, I am very disappointed in you for cheating on your history test. Now be quiet. Daddy has to make a phone call about making a man named Frankie the Weasel disappear. It was a desperate, delusional attempt to build a wall between their brutal reality and a fantasy of wholesome family life, proving that even the most hardened criminals want to believe they're a good guy in their own story. 21. Gangster vanity was a powerful force, and nothing showcased it better than their habit of personalizing everything, right down to their murder weapons. Silk suits with your initials were standard, but the real power move was getting your gun monogrammed. These guys would hire skilled artisans to elegantly engrave their initials onto the pearl or ivory grips of their favorite pistols. This is a level of narcissistic audacity that is simply off the charts. It's not just committing a felony, it's branding it. It's like an artist signing their masterpiece, except the masterpiece is a crime scene. It completely defied all criminal logic, but it sent an unmistakable message of untouchable ego. It told the world you weren't just a killer. You were a connoisseur of crime, with a taste for personalized, lethal accessories. 22. In the treacherous world of the mob, a gift from the boss was often less a present and more a psychological puzzle you had to solve to stay alive. The habit of giving out brand new cars, for example, was a terrifying specialty of some bosses. When you received the keys to a shiny new Cadillac, you had to smile and say thank you, while your brain frantically tried to decode the message. Was this a golden leash? A flashy symbol that you were now his property? Was it meant to make you a more visible target for his enemies? Or even for his own hitmen? Or was it the most sinister option of all? A bomb on wheels, waiting for you to turn the ignition. It was a masterstroke of intimidation, a generous gesture that was dripping with unspoken menace and turned every commute into a life-or-death gamble. 23. The gangster's business card was the ultimate prop in their grand theatrical performance of legitimacy. Capone's famous used furniture dealer card was just one example of a widespread delusional habit. These men, whose actual business was violence and intimidation, would hand out cards identifying themselves as respectable professionals. You had killers posing as sales consultants, enforcers masquerading as import-export specialists, and perhaps the most absurd, uncultured thugs pretending to be fine art dealers. This wasn't just a simple cover story, it was a deep-seated fantasy. They desperately wanted the prestige of being captains of industry. And these little pieces of cardboard were their way of pretending they were just businessmen who occasionally had to use a submachine gun during contract negotiations. 24. For men who prided themselves on being tough, logical, and in control, gangsters had a shockingly widespread habit of outsourcing their biggest decisions to the supernatural. They were deeply, almost comically superstitious, frequently consulting with psychics, astrologers, and fortune tellers before making a major move. Imagine a ruthless, feared mob boss sitting in a dimly lit room across from a woman with a crystal ball, earnestly asking if the planetary alignment was favorable for a casino shakedown. These were men who wouldn't trust their own brother with a secret, yet they would bet their entire criminal enterprise on the interpretation of a tarot card. This bizarre habit revealed the deep-seated paranoia at their core, a quiet acknowledgement that, in their violent, chaotic world, their fate was ultimately out of their hands. 25. You might think the ultimate gangster power move was a successful hit, but the real final flex was turning a funeral into a Hollywood premiere. It was a deeply ingrained habit that when a major mob figure was taken out, his organization would throw the most obscenely extravagant funeral imaginable. We're talking solid bronze caskets that cost more than a suburban home, a motorcade of black Cadillacs that caused citywide traffic jams, and enough flower wreaths to deforest a small country. This wasn't mourning, it was a post-mortem press conference. It was a massive, defiant spectacle designed to send a message to the police, the public, and their rivals. Even in death, our power, wealth, and influence are bigger than yours. It was the last act of showmanship for men who lived their lives on a public stage. 26. For men who made their living through intimidation and violence, many gangsters had a habit that was almost disturbingly gentle. They were completely obsessed with their pets. This wasn't just casual ownership. They doted on their animals with a level of affection they rarely showed to other human beings. Al Capone adored his Newfoundland dog, and countless other mobsters treated their cats, birds, or dogs like royalty. These pets often ate better than the boss's own soldiers, enjoying prime cuts of steak while the bodyguards got leftovers. It's a stunning psychological contradiction. A man who could order a hit without blinking would then go home, get on the floor, and spend an hour playing fetch with his beloved puppy. It was a bizarre glimpse of humanity behind the monstrous facade. 27. Gangsters operated on a simple financial principle. Banks were for suckers. Trusting a legitimate institution with their illegal fortunes was out of the question, which led to the habit of carrying truly colossal amounts of cash on their person. They famously used a Michigan bankroll, a thick wad of bills strategically folded to create an illusion of immense wealth. A high-value bill, like 100, would be on the outside, while the inside was packed with ones and fives. It was a piece of financial theater. Pulling it out to pay for a drink was a non-verbal declaration of power and liquidity. It showed you were operating in a world beyond taxes, records, and the entire banking system. It was the official wallet of the American underworld. 28. The paranoia of a gangster kingpin was an art form, and it extended far beyond watching their back for assassins. The truly powerful ones adopted a habit straight out of a medieval court. They employed a personal food taster. This wasn't just a rumor. Men like Frank Costello were known to be terrified of being poisoned. Imagine the scene. A plate of delicious pasta arrives. But before the boss can take a single bite, a designated underling has to eat a portion and wait to see if he keels over. It's the ultimate status symbol of mistrust. You've reached a level of power so immense that you can't even enjoy a simple meal without first running it through a human guinea pig. It proves that at the top, you can't even trust your own linguine. 29. Al Capone, a man who built an empire on violence and illegal booze, had one of the weirdest side hustles in criminal history. He was a passionate advocate for milk safety. The story goes that a family member got sick from tainted milk, so Capone took it upon himself to fix the entire dairy industry in Chicago. He bought a dairy company and then used classic mob intimidation tactics to force the city council to pass laws requiring expiration dates on all milk bottles. It was a bizarre and violent public health campaign. He was effectively using the threat of broken legs to ensure that the city's children had fresh, safe milk for their breakfast. It's a perfect example of the gangsters' contradictory nature, making people orphans one day and protecting their calcium intake the next. 30. One of the greatest and most dangerous ironies of the Prohibition era was the gangsters' habit of selling absolutely poisonous liquor. These men portrayed themselves as folk heroes, fighting against an unjust law to give the people what they wanted: a drink. However, the product they were fighting and dying to distribute was often literal garbage. To maximize profits, they would dilute their booze with anything they could find, including industrial alcohol, creosote, and even paint thinner. This bathtub gin caused countless cases of blindness, paralysis, and death. So while they were champions of liberty in the press, in reality, they were poisoning their own customers for a quick buck. It was a business model built on the foundation of a massive nationwide bait and switch. 31. Beneath their tough exteriors, mobsters were incurable drama queens with a habit of manufacturing reasons to celebrate. They would throw lavish, expensive parties for the most ridiculously mundane achievements. We're not talking about weddings or major holidays. We're talking about a congratulations on beating that minor loitering charge gala, or an anniversary party for 1 year since we bought this really comfortable couch. They would rent out entire restaurants, hire live bands, and give heartfelt, teary-eyed speeches about completely trivial events. It was a bizarre culture of self-congratulation, a way to add glamour and significance to their chaotic lives. It revealed a surprisingly sentimental, almost childlike need to turn every small victory into a grand, cannoli-fueled spectacle. 32. In the cryptic world of the mob, words never meant what they said, and the habit of the fake promotion was a masterclass in passive-aggressive punishment. When a gangster was told he was being promoted to a new territory, it could mean he was being exiled to a criminal dead zone. One unfortunate soul was promoted to oversee operations in rural North Dakota. Upon arrival, he found there were no operations, just endless fields and a few cows. It was a form of soft execution, a way to remove someone from the power structure without the messiness of a real hit. The organization would set them up in a remote location, effectively putting them out to pasture until they either quit or faded into obscurity. It was the mob's version of being transferred to the mailroom, but with a much higher chance of freezing to death. These habits prove that behind every criminal legend is a profoundly weird human being. But the underworld's history of absurdity is vast, and we know this list isn't complete. So, what is the single most bizarre gangster habit that we were dumb enough to miss? School us in the comments below. If you appreciate history that's stranger than fiction, execute the like button and subscribe for more.